One of the great things about mechanical keyboards is that you can completely transform how they sound and feel simply by changing the switches. The biggest issue is that there are so many options available that one might feel lost and unsure of where to start or what to choose. So we decided to address that. We got all the most popular Gateron switches and tested them for you. Hi, I'm Michael Corby, and today I'll help you choose from the wide range of switches that Gateron has to offer. From fan favorites such as the Old Kings and the Baby Kangaroos to special editions like the Azure Dragon or the SillyWorks Type R. I'll include critical information such as type of switch, operating force, activation distance, total travel, lubrication, construction, and, of course, a sound test and a description of how they feel. For reference, all these switches have been tested on our keyboards, the Dygma D5 and the Dygma Race 2, which have sound dampening foam inside, but not as much as other custom mechanical keyboards focused on sound. Let's start from the top with the Old Kings, a linear switch that's slightly heavier, but not too much. It has an operating force of 55 GF, which stands for grams force, and a classic activation distance of 2 mm, with a total travel of 4 mm. The housing is entirely black, so even though it has a slot to let light shine through, it will be dimmer compared to switches with transparent top housing. You can see that the LEDs on the lights barely shine through. On the other hand, the nylon housing, combined with factory lubrication, eliminates ping and makes this switch sound more bassy than similar alternatives, such as the Gateron Yellow. This is a great switch if you want to try something slightly heavier than your average linear switch, or with a more rounded sound profile. Let's continue with one of the most popular tactile switches out there, the Baby Kangaroos 2.0. This is a relatively heavy linear switch with an operating force of 59 GF. The activation distance is 2 mm and the total travel is 3.4 mm. One interesting aspect of this switch is that you can notice the tactile bump almost immediately, which, combined with a long reinforced spring that helps with the recovery, makes this switch particularly pleasant to type on if you prefer tactile feedback. Another highlight is the diffuser included in the housing to enhance LED consistency and brightness. Finally, there's the sound profile, which will leave no one indifferent. People describe it as marbly, and I think that's accurate. They are loud, but soothing. This is a great switch if you're looking for noticeable tactile feedback or if you like your keyboard to sound like marbles rubbing against each other. Now let's talk about the 0 degree silent, a linear switch that combines a medium operating force, 45 GF, with a silent construction. The activation distance is 1.8 mm with a total travel of 3.6 mm. The interesting thing about these switches is that they are designed to reduce the typical mushy feeling associated with silent switches. They have a double rail for the stem with silent pads in the bottom housing to reduce noise. They also have the same light diffuser as the Baby Kangaroos, so the LEDs shine through nicely. These are an excellent option if you're looking for a silent linear switch that doesn't have that typical mushy feeling, or if you want something heavier than the Kailh Silent Pink, which are 35 GF. However, keep in mind that they are not as silent. And now, let's make some noise with the Gateron Melodic. These are clicky switches with a fairly standard operating force for clicky switches, 60 GF, an activation distance of 2 mm and a total travel of 4 mm. What makes these switches special is their clicky leaf design, which results in a unique sound profile. Most clicky switches use either a click bar, such as the Kailh Box White, or a click jacket, like the MX Blue. Some argue that the sound produced by a click leaf is the cleanest and most satisfying. The sound is a bit less metallic, kind of like popping the bubbles on a bubble bag. But as is often the case with clickies, the sound is polarizing. Either you love it or you hate it. These switches also include all the standard Gateron improvements, such as the consistent factory lubrication, the aforementioned light diffuser, and premium molds and bottom housing. The Gateron Quinns are similar to the baby Kangaroos, with the same 59 GF operating force, 2 mm activation distance, and a total travel distance of 3.4 mm. The primary difference is the nylon housing, similar to the one used in the Oily Kings, which alters the sound profile. They are described as stocky. However, just as the Oil Kings, even though there is a slot for the LED, barely any light shines through. These are a good choice if you like switches like the Boba U4T. Your keyboard will be loud, but pleasing to hear. However, keep in mind that these are relatively heavy switches compared to a standard tactile switch, such as the Kailh Silent Brown, and louder, much louder. Let's now analyze the interesting Gateron Smoothie Collection. All the switches from this collection share three key qualities. One, a POM housing, which absorbs high-pitched sounds, making these switches sound more bassy. Second, a light diffuser that helps redirect the light towards the keycap, making these switches surprisingly good for RGB keyboards, regardless of the opaque housing. And third, a very even factory lubrication, which provides a satisfying typing experience, hence the Smoothie name. There is a Gateron Smoothie flavor for every taste. Classic, a light linear with an operating force of 40 GF. Sea salt, a balanced linear with an operating force of 48 GF. Banana, a heavy tactile with an operating force of 60 GF. Mint, a balanced linear is slightly lighter than the sea salt with an operating force of 45 GF, and they are silent. Chocolate, a marginally lighter tactile than the bananas with an operating force of 55 GF. And strawberry, a light linear very similar to the classics. They have the same operating force of 40 GF, but the classics have a total travel distance of 3.8 mm compared to the 4 mm of this. Finally, I want to talk about a couple of other switches, special collaborations with Nufi and SillyWorks, the Azure Dragon V4 and the SillyWorks Type R. The Azure Dragon V4 is a very special switch. It's tactile, but while most tactile switches have a short, noticeable bump, these have a longer bump. The operating force is 65 GF, so quite heavy, and they are also quite short, with a total travel distance of only 3 mm. This makes them feel a bit of a linear tactile hybrid. Sound-wise, they have nothing special going for them, although they are lubed. They also have the light diffuser we mentioned earlier. The SillyWorks Type R is another attempt to make different tactile switches. In this case, you notice the bump immediately. There is no linear travel beforehand, unlike most tactile switches. Another thing to highlight, or should I say high dark, is that there is no gap for the light. This is supposed to improve the housing closure, but means that these are absolutely not recommended if you have an RGB keyboard. You can notice that there is no light where we place them. that's it. I hope this has helped you better understand the differences among the most popular Gateron switches. If you fancy the Oil Kings, the Baby Kangaroos, or the 0 degree silence, we have started offering them on dygma.com/switches. And if you'd like us to test other switches or offer a different model on our shop, please let us know in the comments.